He is the acclaimed American author of 2 influential books about China. But he has also been the subject of much speculation both in China and the West.
Welcome back. We've all heard the warnings. America is losing manufacturing jobs. There are efforts to level the playing field now with China. Robert, do you agree with that? And if so, what do you think can be done about it?
Well, first of all, the bilateral relationships between America and China are most important for our domestic economy and international security in the time ahead. In fact,
How did this American become so involved with China's power structure? Who is he? During the 1980s, Kuhn helped large Japanese companies with their strategic expansion through mergers and acquisitions. With a doctorate in brain research and a career as an investment banker, he paid little attention to China. Without the persuasion of Dr. Sung Jian, he would probably still have little connection with the country. In early 1989, through a mutual friend, Dr. George Kosmensky, Dr. Sung decided to invite Kuhn to attend a conference on the commercialization of China's technology.
当时我们的口号不是叫做科学技术要面向经济，经济建设要依靠科学技术。我们提了一个口号叫做下海，要动员一大批科研人员下海。马上就碰到一个问题，这个下海你这么一登高一呼，叫大家下海，淹死怎么办？后来这个就知道了，这个Kosmensky啊跟我说，是这个并购是个很好的办法，就是你要是不成功啊，你这个小企业不成功，你卖了它，卖了它以后，你这几年啊，你就没白费啊，你能拿到一点，把资本啊投入的资金收回来，个人还会有点收获。
So the concept was very important to me because I loved science. I was trained as a scientist in brain science. I was an investment banker, and I looked to restructurings and figuring out how science could be commercialized. So I loved doing that. The fact that it was in China was interesting, but that actually initially was not that important to me.
In 1989, Adam Zhu was in his early 20s and working as a junior officer in the State Science and Technology Commission. He was assigned to be Kuhn's interpreter.
He always asks you why are you doing this? Ask you talk about science and technology and how China. And so I cannot talk on China because I don't know China. I want to talk about what's going on in US, in Germany, or in Israel, which he's very knowledgeable.
But there was something else that interested Kuhn.
I had been a very good player for an American when I was about 9 years old to about 11, 12 years old, and then I didn't play for a long time. So it was my kind of stereotyped image when I was in China for the first time to try to play table tennis.
One day he came to me and said, okay, I'm not going to the afternoon session. I finished my speaking in the morning. I want to play ping pong. I said, well, Dr. Kuhn, you can't do that.
And he said, no, it's impossible because you have a schedule, you have to go to the Great Wall, Beijing Opera, all the different things we have scheduled. And I said, well, that's nice, but that to me, I want to play table tennis.
I said, Dr. Kuhn, I can't do that. Once again, I'm very junior. I can't make any mistakes.
So every time I would see him, I told him I wanted to play table tennis. And every time he would see me coming, he'd go the other direction because he was very nervous that I kept asking him.
And he grabbed me again. He said, Adam, this is the last time I have to tell you. You have to make an arrangement for me to play ping pong.
If you don't help me play table tennis, I came to China, nobody's paying me. I came all the way here to help China. about entrepreneurial ideas. And if you're not willing to take a risk, there's no hope for your whole country.
And he got very mad, very angry at me.
I really kind of made him feel bad. So a couple of days later, he came up with a very innovative way that got me to play table tennis at People's University, Renmin-Dashua.
Kuhn played with a few top professional ping pong players. Needless to say, he didn't win, but he admitted he had a wonderful time. When he and Adam Jew met again in the mid-1990s in America, their friendship grew. They have now been working together on their China projects for more than 20 years. Kuhn was different from many other foreigners. What impressed him on his first visit was not any abstract notion of Chinese culture.
People I was meeting were from the science background. Many of them had PhDs in science, and there was a vibrancy and an enthusiasm. I call it a naive enthusiasm, because they didn't know what they couldn't do, and they had great visions of what they thought they could do.
But Kuhn's friendship with China has had its ups and downs. At the end of the 1980s, China was isolated from international society. Antipathy towards China was widespread. Along with many fellow Americans, Kuhn decided to boycott China.
He said something very interesting to me that changed my life. He said, any problems we have in China are more your fault, he pointed to me, than my fault, meaning him. And I said, what does that mean? That doesn't make sense. And he said, if China is going backwards or not moving forward as fast as we should, it's because people like you who like China, who could help China, have stayed away. Suddenly I said, you're right, I'll come back.
More than a year after his first visit, Kuhn returned to China. This was the beginning of a series of frequent visits to advise on science, technology, and mergers and acquisitions.
Such as cash, products, it could be fixed assets like machinery, a desk, or it could be intangible, like intelligence, creativity, a patent that you own.
就这件事情呢，我觉得对我，因为我当时主持的科技体制改革是最大的一个难题。那这个书生一样的，哗，大家向前冲，什么下海后淹死怎么办？这个问题解决得非常好。这个 Robert 啊，出了很好的主意，他自己这个经验也对我们有很大的帮助。他参加了这个像中关村的情况研究调查，他也参加过。还有就是当时科委主管这方面的事，也给他们都交流过情况。所以我觉得中国的高技术产业的发展，特别是高新技术产业的开发区的发展，Robert 是真，我非常感谢他。他不是一般的吆喝，他是给你具体的办法。
By that time, Kuhn was president and co-owner of the Geneva Companies, the largest and most prominent American merger and acquisition firm. Through the Kuhn Foundation, he has facilitated the visits of many Chinese government delegations. All of Kuhn's advisory work is free. Sung Nin, who worked in the State-Owned Asset Supervision and Administration Bureau at that time, was among the visitors.
库恩很专业，他讲了很多的案例，给我们很多的启示，对后来的这个推进国有企业的并购，制定一些规范企业产权转让、国有企业产权转让的规章制度都是有益的。
But Kuhn's interest in China goes far beyond investment banking.
In 1978, China began moving away from a government-controlled economy toward a free market.
Before the changes, we were starving. You had to sell every last
In the
egg
middle
you owned.
1990s, after I was working in China in science and then finance for a long time, I just realized that every time I would tell people about China, they wouldn't believe me. And I've always loved media. I've always loved television, and I've had do television programs in science, and so I really love the media of television. And I felt one way to communicate to the world is not only through writing articles, because that's more intellectual, but give people an emotional experience of being there, so they could experience like what I was experiencing by being up close, not an economic analysis, but personalities, stories of people. And I realized a documentary for television would be that.
In the past,
Between 1997 and 2000, the Kuhn Foundation invested $1.5 million producing a documentary in cooperation with CCTV.
That spent this discretionary money I had because it gave me great intellectual fulfillment. I felt I was achieving something by bringing these rich stories of ordinary people, not just successful entrepreneurs and some political leaders, but rural women and handicapped people and migrant workers and people laid off from bankrupt factories, and telling the complex, variegated stories that make up China.
Okay, we wasted a lot of resources, and also at the time, going through the process of shooting China was not easy. I can tell you that. Shooting permit, and in those days, Robert was not as known as he is today. People know he's an investment banker. Why he wanted to do television shows in China. So people, which I understand, will be skeptical, and maybe he has a different agenda. He's going to do something to hurt China, because we did not have the credibility at the time. We were just trying.
因为整整3年时间，库恩天天跟我们摄制组在一起，而且我们摄制组拍摄过程中，有的时候也会遇到不少的挫折，而且有的时候实际上拍摄，因为我们是采取完全纪实的这种拍摄方法，非常枯燥无味的。那么有的时候跟一天，可能这个镜头都不能用一个，甚至有的时候我们最长跟了12天，一个镜头都用不了。所以摄制组有的时候就是这个心情非常沉闷。因为拍的有些东西也是这个比较压抑的，不是那么特别让人感觉有兴趣的东西，那么库恩呢就时时的经常的鼓励我们，他还用他当时学的有限的汉语发明了一个词叫非常好好干，那么经常用这句话拍拍我们的摄像的肩膀说非常好好干啊，拍拍我们的编导的肩膀说非常好好干啊，而且经常在我们遇到问题的时候，拍摄进行不下去的时候，或者说感觉采访难度太大想放弃的时候，库恩经常会说一句汉语，他说有办法，有办法。
In September 2000, the documentary was aired on PBS thanks to Kuhn's efforts. And it was the Washington Post TV critics' pick of the week. That same week, Kuhn watched the CBS 60 Minutes show at home, in which Mike Wallace interviewed President Jiang Zemin.
At first, I would like to speak a few words in English. Time flies very fast.
Yeah.
We met for the first time in 1986.
You and I?
That's right. When I was mayor of Shanghai, I hope to convey through your program my best wishes to American people.
President Jiang Zemin was being interviewed by Mike Wallace, who was notoriously the most difficult interviewer in America. He gives everybody a hard time. And I was so captivated by the interview, not just by what President Jiang said and how he dealt with Mike Wallace, but when he talked about history and about his experiences as a student. And I realized that even though I had this documentary on PBS the same week, that there was this vast amount of contemporary Chinese history that I didn't appreciate. And I suddenly had the thought that President Zhang had lived through this period, and maybe the way that I can learn it and tell the world.
Coincidentally, during the same week, Kuhn met President Zhang at the Lincoln Center. Zhang was attending a Chinese folk music concert and meeting some American business leaders. Kuhn was among them.
People have made up all sorts of stories about how the book started. People in the West, critics, imagined that Chinese government asked me to do it. Not true at all.
However, writing a biography, especially of a Chinese leader, was a challenge.
A lot of people didn't believe that's the real agenda. Some thought we have political agenda. Some thought we had a business agenda. Who knows? I mean, people have free to think whatever they want to think. So it was very difficult, to first of all to get interviews. Secondly, even some interviews we had not as the honest and straightforward. So and make us very difficult.
But a breakthrough occurred. Maybe it was coincidental, maybe not. When I met a very, very distinguished and fine human being by the name of Wang Weizhong. And Mr. Wang was a research scholar, an economist. He'd been trained as an engineer. And it turns out he was one of President Jiang Zemin's lifelong friends. He was his friend in college, and although they were separated for several decades during the political movements, they have been friends, very close friends, for a long time. And I got to know him, and he got to know me. And we talked science. And then after a while, he began to tell me some stories. And so I wrote them down. And, I didn't push forward. And then I saw him again and told me some more stories. And then the next time I asked him some questions. First time I didn't ask any questions because I didn't know whether I was supposed to.
Later on, Kuhn gained access to many important figures, including Zhang's friend, the former mayor of Shanghai, Mr. Wang Dahan.
I didn't see him for months. When I say I didn't see him, I saw him in the house, but he was sitting in that office in the corner with his computer, working day and night. People think, well, he's writing so many books, how's he doing it? When is he going out? You have to cut down your social life. You cannot have Friday, Saturday, Sunday going out with people. You have to be very focused in what you're doing.
If somebody looks at me when I'm working, they may not think I'm enjoying it because I look very tense, I'm nervous, I'm struggling.
At the end of 2003, something happened that almost ended the project.
It was very intense in the writing process. He had used a lot of research. He had, when he was writing, when you sit on the chair for hours, sometimes for 10 hours, no move. Your spine is always under tremendous pressure. So the discs actually, there was a serious inflammation of the disc, and there's a mismatch of the disc. So the spine inflammation, that triggered his back problem.
然后我记着有一次他来中国来北京，下了飞机直接就进医院了。就是那种情况下，我去的时候，我看他还在坚持写作，在写东西，所以让我觉得为这种精神特别感动。
He just lay down on the floor and doesn't move. He writing, basically, set up a computer. He lay on the floor and writing like this.
And this is how I worked, literally like this. And I was working like this for about 8 months.
When he was in China, we had a wheelchair him around, and it was very painful. I mean, I asked him to quit. Tell you the truth, in 2003 when he had that problem, because for me, and as I said, he's like a father, brother, mentor, teacher kind of relationship. I see him, going through this painful process. Maybe it's not worth it.
Kuhn donated half of the royalties to the Hope Primary Schools, the Chinese Academy of Social Science, and other research institutes. Chen Xin was the publisher of Kuhn's biography of Zhang.
他并没有把他作为一个在我们的感觉当中领袖那么高深莫测啊，就很非常的这个难以接近啊。他不是外国人不这样，他可能把他作为一个人活生生的人来看待，从这一个角度来切入来写作，所以更加容易引起读者的兴趣。
However, after the book was published, Kuhn was asked why he did not interview President Zhang himself.
I was not feeling bad because I had tremendous numbers of terrific stories around him. People who knew him at different parts of his life who told me first-person accounts. And so I felt that and plus my research, I felt I had a very, very good understanding. However, I did feel that I was missing a little bit of the first-hand personality. And so what I was able to do before the book was published is I did meet President Zhang. It wasn't an interview. I didn't take any notes, no recorder, but there were a number of people with him. It was an informal occasion for several hours, including a dinner. But it was a very meaningful because I really saw President Zhang's personality come out. I didn't take any notes, but when I went home to the hotel for the next 4 hours, I remembered all the different things that we talked about. And when I saw his personality, I was able to then take the research and transfer it into his personality. And that's what I tried to do.
Zhang Zemin's comment on the book is, "It is very objective, it does not glorify me, but only gets the wedding date wrong."